had a great opportunity to open the first luxury retail mall in Cambodia, which was in Siem Reap at that time.
Vanna, and welcome to Rising Giants. It's great to have you on the podcast. It's been a long time coming. We've been following all the developments with Dorsu and the business that you've created there and seen get investment over the last few years and go from strength to strength. So we are excited to talk more about this. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about your early career journey and your time in the US. So maybe you could just share a bit more about your experience over there and then how that kind of set the stage for being an entrepreneur.
Okay, thank you for having me, Max. Pleasure to be here. Um, I really consider myself something of like an accidental entrepreneur, more than, I think that the typical journey of going to business school and developing ideas and then, going into the world and trying to build these things. To me, that sounds like a really amazing path, but not quite the one that I had.
Mm.
I was lucky to be born as a refugee, after the genocide period, and my parents and my family, grew up in the States. So I was pretty lucky to, be educated, in the U.S. and had great opportunities to learn and to work as well. I I think it was about 2008 after the financial crisis or during the financial crisis that I got an opportunity to consider coming to Cambodia, and finally made the leap over in 2010 from New York. I was in Brooklyn at that time, and came over and just, had a really interesting experience at this NGO in technology, kind of digital space. And yeah, really had an interesting experience and kind of fell in love with the energy of Cambodia at that time. This was 2010, so it was my first time back, and yeah, I didn't really have a master plan for what I intended to do. It was more just kind of be on the ground and learn and explore and try to understand a bit more, as much as possible. Was coming from a kind of digital marketing background, so got into like some marketing agencies and did some work with different companies and organizations, which eventually landed me with a great kind of arts-based project that was taking place in New York City in 2013 at that time. Had an amazing time and incredible experience bringing artists over and kind of really seeing the connections between Cambodia and the kind of the support that Cambodia had in this kind of global community. And I came back and took a job with the DFS Group, which is part of the LVMH, or was or is, I'm not quite sure of the
Yeah.
current status. But had a great opportunity to open the first luxury retail mall in Cambodia, which was in Siem Reap at that time. So spent a few years there in Siem Reap, really got to understand the tourist industry, working with hotels, hospitality, kind of seeing, the need to collaborate in Cambodia and how important it is to work across industries and sectors. But that was an intense experience and really incredible. And then I came back to Phnom Penh, and worked for a few years in technology. And then COVID happened, and that was, I think, kind of a pivotal moment for a lot of us to
Mm.
think about, what we're doing with our lives and what we can be doing to help make things better. And in Cambodia at that time, the garment industry was really taking a big hit.
Mm.
In terms of cancellations of orders and kind of the shrinking of demand in the global economy and all of these disruption and changes. As a Cambodian living here, you saw the impact on a major industry that impacted millions of people, in the economy, in a great way. And I had an opportunity to acquire a small sustainable fashion brand company manufacturer that was based in Kampot. One that I had been following for years, and was a customer of, and I always had loved the quality, and really loved the products and the story and the work that was being done. So that COVID was a difficult time for a lot of companies, especially small ones working in the provinces and rural areas. So I kind of felt a little spark of, an opportunity to help and provide, help to think about what the path forward could be for that. So that's how I ended up acquiring Dorsu
Mm.
in 2021,
Mm.
I think, was when that was finalized. So now it's been 3 years. This is going into year 4, and it's been ups and downs, and we've really had some incredible learnings and experiences, but just a lot of excitement about the future and what the potential is out there. So
Mm. And so, in your career, like working with, DFS Group and a handful of other companies, what were some of like the key lessons that you learned along the way that have kind of set you up for being an entrepreneur? Like what were some of
don't be afraid to ask questions. uh, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. I learned so much in corporate retail.
Mm-hmm.
Things that are very disciplining, that really teach you like what really matters,
Mm.
the importance of KPIs, the importance of teamwork, understanding how to speak to people, interpersonal communication, there's so much that goes into kind of running a successful enterprise, that you can learn from people who do it, who've been doing it for years and decades, and you kind of see how things are always evolving, especially even in organizations that you would think, oh, they have it figured out. They've been doing this. They know, they have their playbooks, they have their strategy, just need to unroll it, right?
Mm.
But it's like, well, it's great to have a plan,
Right.
but sometimes, you'll get curveballs, and then it's kind of about, okay, the strength of the team, the ability to pull together, solve challenges, so I really am thankful to have that corporate experience in a market like Cambodia, where it almost is very it's very in development stages, right?
Mm. And you also mentioned about like being the first luxury mall in Siem Reap, and also in the country. What was that like, sort of going down that path of being the first in a sector, and how has it kind of unfolded the luxury retail space since then in Cambodia?
Yeah, I think that the retail industry, especially in fashion and luxury, is very responsive to the market and
Mm.
global trends, and what's happening globally in terms of travel. At that time was Chinese travelers, so it made sense for there to be something that catered to this burgeoning class of
Mm.
new money, essentially, but also how to kind of engage with those customers
Mm.
and from a brand perspective, so kind of encountering all these different brands, and working with them, so we had, I think, almost 200 to 300 different brands. So across
Wow.
different categories, right? From beauty to fashion to, spirits, wine and tobacco,
Yeah.
food and gift,
Yeah.
it was getting to see like, okay, here are these global massive companies and how they do certain things. And then there are these other ways of doing it across these other kinds of organizations. And that was really neat to see.
Mm.
I think it goes back to kind of finding that balance between how things are done globally and then how you can do things in Cambodia.
Mm. Mm.
And it's always a kind of push and pull. There needs to be some kind of compromise. It's
Right.
always kind of a bit of negotiation from both sides, and being able to see, the person that you're working with or that you're trying to work with as like an equal partner in things, rather than I tell you what to do and you go and execute. It's like, actually, if you engage with people on a human level, like, and
Mm.
to really try to understand what can we actually achieve together, I think it yields more fruitful results.
Mm.
So that's something that, I think the luxury industry, I think really unlocking that is kind of the key to like things like customer service and brand loyalty. It's
Mm.
like, how do you really connect with people?
Right.
Yeah, so I think, that's still a challenge for whether it's luxury retail or mass market, consumer retail. It's how do you connect with people?
Mm.
So I think it will always be relevant.
Yeah.
Uh,
And was like the culture of LVMH being the largest luxury, most like the number one player in the sector globally by quite
mm.
some margin. Was the culture of LVMH really kind of embedded in the DFS group, or was it sort of more of a localized team, or like how did that work? The relationship between like the parent company and
Yeah, that's
the
a
local
really
team.
that's a really interesting question. I think it was fascinating the relationship because
Mm,
there was definitely you had like the kind of imprint of the global parent company,
yeah.
and then you also had localization of things. And I
Mm,
I thought that there was that balance, that made it quite nice and created something really special in a unique way rather than trying to make it one way or the other,
right.
I thought actually it worked out quite nicely the way that we were able to integrate kind of local elements of culture and Cambodian. I guess everybody talks about like that unique sense of place, and I think Cambodia definitely has that.
Mm,
And for a large group like theirs, you know, Cambodia is barely a blip on,
right.
on the radar. But actually, in terms of the kind of work that was being done, it was really groundbreaking. This hadn't really been done. We were opening a store that year, and there was only one other that was being built, and it was in Venice. So those were the two kind of projects for that group that were really kind of showcasing tourism focused kind of, marketing,
Mm,
merchandising, kind of thing. So they definitely invested a ton of energy and resources and you know, um, you know, really try to bring the local perspective also
mm,
to the table, but also saying that we do have some global expertise, we do have and an emphasis on quality,
yeah.
craftsmanship, heritage, these things that are very important to the luxury space. I think those are things that actually resonated quite well with
Mm,
Cambodians. Just because it's an underdeveloped country doesn't mean it lacks for a sense of history and culture and appreciation of quality and craftsmanship. Like that's not like belongs to one part of the world and not the other.
mm.
Cambodia isn't just a place of cheap mass manufacturing. It's
Right.
it's
I
it's
mean, yeah, I mean, like if you look at like Rolls Royces per capita,
yeah.
I think we'd be actually relatively high in terms of,
Yeah, I mean, there's so many SUVs in this
yeah,
country. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure there's a lot of factors that influence that,
yeah,
right?
right, right, right.
But I think, obviously, I mean, I think like macroeconomic level, I think, Cambodia's still got a long way to go. I'm
Yeah,
fundamentally very optimistic about it. I think it's really just the beginning,
yeah,
of what it could be. But I also think that like it can be really something amazing that's not anything that people have kind of seen before.
mm,
For me, of course, that has to do with sustainability and kind of looking at ways of doing things responsibly, in a way that really like, okay, Cambodia has this opportunity because it kind of has like an outsized voice or platform
right,
to share with the world what it's been through, right?
right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the
Yeah, I think
yeah.
too many people underestimate Cambodia, and it's like for example, I try and give when people ask me, they say, oh, it's a small economy, it's a small country. You go, well, look at Taiwan, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Taiwan's nearly $1 trillion economy, and they've
I
got
mean, Luxembourg is a
yeah,
small it's a
yeah,
small country. Come
yeah,
on, guys. It's not really about the size,
yeah,
right?
right.
you know?
Right.
Uh,
And even Singapore, right? 6 million people.
right.
Yeah, done very well. So no, I think it's Cambodia does have like this very interesting. It's still in this period where I also think the other unique thing is when you start your development a bit later, and also
Hmm.
Cambodia went through its like first. Well, one of the first booms happened during COVID, so it's
Right.
like it's an interesting like digitization and a lot of different trends that happened during COVID. Um, but but you get to learn from the rest of the world,
Right.
and you get to learn like what did they all get wrong,
Right.
and then you try and forge your own path.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's a it's really cool to see unfold. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, young people especially like having both the freedom to kind of think outside of what has previously been done before, but also like still learn from kind of other examples, globally, because now with internet, and availability of information around certain things, it's like it's really incredible. I'm like, young people nowadays have opportunities and things that I can't imagine, that I
Mm,
didn't imagine.
right.
I'm 43 years old, right? I'm like not young.
I mean,
uh,
the average, I think we're still, in the region where average age here,
26,
27,
27.
fertility rate
Yeah.
still good. Like one of the really, like one of the strong countries from a demographic perspective
Hmm.
still. And what's it also been like you mentioned about coming to Cambodia and almost being like surprised by the opportunities here. What is it like kind of seeing that perception and reality kind of differ? Because I think a lot of people, when you talk to them and you say you're in Cambodia, they kind of have this like very weird perception, right? But it's normally the people that have that have never actually been, right?
Right, right,
So
right.
how do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah. I mean, I just let people have their own experiences
Right,
and their opinions about
right,
things. Um, I always really love seeing somebody coming to Cambodia for the first time
yeah,
be surprised, or, kind of, pleasantly surprised by what they encounter. It's hard to like, it's hard to guess what other people are going to feel and experience.
right,
I I think, yeah, I think, and it's a large part of just like being human now, of
mm,
like kind of take off what you learned and what you thought you knew, and go out and experience it for yourself.
mm,
Make your own judgment, like talk to people, understand, explore. I think in some ways, it's Cambodia is like super inviting for people. It's
right.
very affordable, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised that, whatever preconceived notions they had, like prepared to be challenged.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Like gently,
yeah.
right? But also not so gently sometimes. Cambodia is a challenge. I mean, it's like it's this place, you're taught certain things in school, and just kind of like, well, here's a curveball.
Mm,
And could it be done differently? I think it really embodies that kind of spirit of like, yeah, can we do things differently? Is there, opportunities for it to innovate, to disrupt, but I think that again, that comes down to the people.
mm.
And I
And
think the people are the most important part.
what role would you say, or like, I mean, because obviously another interesting perspective you have is like being Cambodian American, or like having that American experience.
Mm.
What's it like, kind of like working with people kind of that also Cambodian American? What kind of role do they play in the economy here, and like how have you been able to see that unfold as well?
I think the role that Cambodian Americans and kind of Cambodian foreigners, people who were raised abroad, I think it's a vital one
Yeah,
that, you look at other countries and
mm,
other communities, expat, like, local expat communities.
yeah,
There's not a really good word for it. There
right,
should be one. But they have a huge role to play in rebuilding, kind of structures and institutions that didn't get an opportunity to previously exist before, or
right,
in the right kind of way. I think Cambodian American, because you have the French,
right.
you have the Australians. I'm thinking like Cambodians from, you don't have many from like other parts of Europe.
Yeah, not so
I've
much.
met some from like the Netherlands.
Yeah, okay,
They're
interesting.
awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, everybody's awesome. Everybody
yeah.
brings a really unique point of view, and it's
Mm.
really great to meet. Like, I feel like it's great. Like, I meet a Cambodian like Swiss person, or you can Cambodian Japanese,
Yeah.
Jambodian. If you met a
Gem
Jambodian.
I have not. I have not.
um,
That's a good
I
word.
think the hybridity of those
Mm.
experiences helps to enrich, the community, and
Right.
what like how ways of doing things.
Yeah, especially in the startup space, I'd say
Yeah,
that Cambodian Americans like
yeah.
play a big role.
I think the French play a bigger role.
Yeah, and also, but yeah, it's like certain parts of like the
Right.
the spaces. Like yeah, there are some like sectors where, of course,
Right.
I mean, especially in fashion, right?
Well, yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the French connection here has been just
Yeah.
much longer. But, I think a lot of us were, like privileged to be raised and, have the experience of growing up there and kind of taking those learnings and
Yeah.
bringing them back here. I think, yeah, for me, obviously it's important and you try to lead by example. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to write a book on how to do this stuff, but like, okay, here's the stuff that I can do to show people that it can be done. I'm not saying it's easy.
Right.
Like, it's really challenging being a small business owner in
Mm-hmm.
Cambodia. Trying to go like ethical, trying to be sustainable, trying to follow the letter of the law as much as you can,
Mm.
being in compliance with policies and regulations and things. It's really challenging. Um, I don't recommend. It's not for the faint of heart, for sure.
Yeah.
And you have to, but I also, I'm like, the work that I do isn't like startup tech founder, but I'm like, I don't want to disparage that because I know that's just as like, you know, challenging of a path to do as well.
Yeah,
For
I think the
me,
broad term is like you're a business innovator, or
oh
you're in the
yeah,
business space, and or like you're innovating, right?
yeah,
That's what we cover at least on the like when people say startups, they always think tech,
yeah.
but it's like you're in a part of your sector that is innovating,
Right,
innovating your
right, right. Because if we look at the big picture,
right,
it's like what we're doing is innovating in
right,
the fashion and apparel space,
right,
right?
right.
Like using dead stock, surplus fabrics is definitely, one kind of a strategy to be using materials that are already in
Mm,
existence, right? It's like, unfortunately, that's just not how the larger industry works, which just
right.
kind of like blows your mind, you know?
Mm,
But I think, in some ways it's kind of like, okay, our proposed solution is something that just makes sense, right?
yeah,
There's the materials that are left over. Somebody should use
yeah,
it, create value out of it, create something cool and quality, and employs people and helps strengthen, the local economy and gives opportunity. It just makes sense.
right.
But I don't know, the challenges to doing that, are massive,
Yeah,
and takes, so much work between different companies and partners in order to kind of get to the point where you can actually then implement some strategies,
mm,
that can help to reduce, the burdens on the planet and on people.
yeah. But before like diving into Dorsu like in more detail, could you also for some of the listeners, could you set the stage a little bit for like the garment sector in Cambodia
Mm.
in general? When did it uh, get going? Obviously, it's like the most important sector, I think, aside from agriculture, in Cambodia, and obviously makes up a huge chunk of exports. So maybe just set that stage for listeners that don't quite understand the role that the garment sector plays in Cambodia.
I mean, I think it's hard to deny that the past 20, 30 years of Cambodia's development would have taken the same trajectory without the work that garment workers have done.
Mm, right,
80% women, right? So this
right,
is a predominantly female labor force. Estimates between what, like 800,000 to a million people now, and it's huge. So if you look at Cambodia now and you say, "Listen, like, we've come a long way. Like
yeah,
we owe a huge debt of gratitude, and more than that to the women who've you know did that." So I think it's hard to overstate the importance of the garment industry and garment workers in Cambodia. And if you look at it globally as well, I mean, the rise of mass fashion and, the fashion industry globally is a huge part of kind of different cultures and
mm,
countries and economies. And, it's played a massive role and has had a massive impact on how we understand, you know, our clothing and where it comes from and who makes it, to the point now where it's gotten so hyper efficient,
mm,
that, everything is, kind of, um, kind of all about price and low costs. And, we've come to take for granted the system's ability to produce cheap, fast mass fashion without thinking that those kinds of things are actually quite fragile, right?
Mm.
The infrastructure and these companies, it's like this is what COVID taught us, right? The
Right.
fragility of supply chains, right? So, if it's hard to overstate the role that fashion plays in the world, and especially in Cambodia, that's so reliant on the economy, the economically reliant on it. We obviously wouldn't be here without garment workers.
Yeah.
So let's do what we can to make sure that, we're valuing their work properly. And I think for Cambodia itself, it's for me, it's about a question of how do we elevate the perception of value for work that comes from here, right? Across the board.
Mm.
Yes, and that starts at the smallest level with garment workers, right? Because that will be, you're only strong as your you're only as strong as your weakest, your lowest link. So let's make sure that from that level. I mean, I'm not like here to be an activist and advocate for this. I don't know what the right policies are. I
Mm.
don't know what's tolerable between, for different companies and different organizations. I think that we all need to be humble and open and engaging with the different players and actors and parts of it, from brands to buyers to consumers to suppliers, fabric mills. It's just, these are global things,
Mm.
and it's going to require kind of global cooperation in order to really solve it.
Mm.
Of course, I run a sustainable fashion brand, but sustainable fashion brands are not going to be the silver bullet, to fixing the world's problems around, environmental degradation and, treatment of people. We can play a role in that, but ultimately the solution is going to require much, much larger systems and processes
Mm.
and, just kind of, yeah, improving things,
Mm.
and you see a lot of activity kind of going on. Internationally, EU is doing a lot around regulation and policy. There's conversations in all parts of the world about how to do things better. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if there's the will politically yet, but I think that's where it's like these conversations are happening, right? It's like 20, 30 years ago, people weren't necessarily talking about this in the same
Right.
kind of way. So, um,
And who are the main like competitors to Cambodia, let's say, in terms of like the other countries that are
uh,
leading in the
I
garment
mean,
sector?
China's number one producer
Right.
globally, right? By far.
Yeah.
After that, I mean, they consult the actual,
Yeah.
there's facts out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
people. Don't listen to me. But I think Bangladesh, India,
Right.
Vietnam, Indonesia,
Yeah.
these countries. Cambodia has, I mean, it's been like historically in like the top 15.
Yeah.
I think last year was broke into top 10.
Okay.
So yeah, significant. And
And which of those countries would you say is trying to like push towards being like known as more of a sustainable?
I think Vietnam is making great progress and strides. I mean, I think obviously the big player would be China,
Mm.
right? If we can get, I mean, China, we can't solve sustainability without really
Yeah.
like, making sure that the Chinese, I mean, obviously, and then the Chinese and Americans, right? I feel like the biggest producing nation needs the biggest consuming nation to keep going.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's about working with both the giants and the smaller players
Mm.
as well, right? Yeah, I think in terms of sustainability, Vietnam has made really, really
Mm.
great strides. You hear great things. I mean, there's always great stories out there
Yeah.
somewhere, I mean, there's also really, kind of challenging ones as well.
Mm. And
But
what about on the consumer side? Do a lot of like what percent of consumers would you say um like feel that like sustainability is a very important part of their consumer decision
I
in
think
fashion?
I think the data out there says that like people will say that they care about it, but
Yeah.
then they won't like buying habits won't actually
Yeah.
follow through. I think there's probably a variety of factors influencing that discrepancy. It makes sense. Yeah, you ask somebody on the street, do you care about
Of
sustainability? Of
course.
course they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah.
you go shopping at the mall and picked up something off the rack? Yes, of course you did. Also, I think that like really the consumer awareness, I think, piece is definitely much higher than it was
Mm.
before,
Mm.
I think ultimately in terms of activity and purchasing behavior, I think it's a much more complex story.
Mm.
you know I think that if we try to apply one standard, of like, you must shop at these particular brands in order to consider yourself sustainable, I think you're always going to fail.
Mm,
I think there's an opportunity to reach out to people who make choices, the best choices that they can under the certain conditions that they
mm,
can. We're not all in the same position. The mother of three in Detroit that has no, like expendable income is going to make her choices, based on what's available to her. Personally, I would love for the fashion system to be such that, you know, we manufacture and we create sustainably and ethically without consumers needing to have to make the choice to, um,
mm,
support this or that. It should be
mm.
built into the system, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
I don't know. I know that like the conversation on sustainable fashion on social media and on the internet takes on a certain kind of flavor of like,
Mm.
oh, shop these brands and, consume these things. But you're like, fundamentally, you're not going to solve the overproduction and overconsumption crisis by pushing more consumption, right?
Mm.
Yes, consuming better, buying less, buying better, those things like definitely do apply, but we do need to be skeptical of some of these, kind of things that these forces out there that are like, trying to push you on the most sustainable hoodie ever.
Yeah.
Like, what? What does that mean?
It kind of reminds me of when they had these I mean it seemed like a bit of a fad, to be honest, and I guess it kind of worked out like that is when they had these companies like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like this is the most sustainable burger,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it never quite caught on,
I
right?
don't know. I mean, I think it's still interesting, right?
Yeah.
As a concept.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that like because it's so over processed, then
Yeah.
it comes with another host of issues for health and
Yeah.
other kinds of things. So I think these are the kinds of problems that are looking for solutions that we need to like really kind of think outside the box. And those
Mm.
kinds of things are great. Like I think I understand why that's attracting billions of dollars in,
Yeah.
like VC, could potentially revolutionize and change things. I think in the fashion space, there's that opportunity as well, right?
Mm.
We do a small scale kind of stuff, but, and I don't have any plans to become like a big mass market brand. I
Yeah.
don't think that at this point is in line with, kind of,
Mm.
our ethos, but who knows, right? That could evolve, that could change. I mean, coming from technology, having studied technology, from
Mm.
a like research point of view, like what role can technology play in helping to improve, the fashion and apparel
Mm.
landscape, and from shopping to, post consumer life of things. I
Mm.
think that yeah, I mean, I think it would be really interesting to kind of explore that a bit more,
Mm.
in the future. But, right now it's not necessarily like the next big strategy for us.
Mm.
I think a lot of people look at e-com and, selling online. It's like when they talk about technology and fashion, it's like, okay, have you built a really great website that gets people to buy your stuff,
Yeah.
But I think, that's an opportunity for us as well in the
Mm.
future. But then I, try to think about how could technology help you find better sizing for your garments, reducing the rate of returns on things, and
Mm.
for all businesses, there's challenges that could be solved. I think if
Mm.
we looked at technology as a tool.
Thank you for that framing on the sustainable fashion space.
Mm.
We'd now like to just jump in a little bit more to Dorsu and the company that you acquired in 2021, and what it's been like growing that business. But before that, please just share a little bit more about what Dorsu is today.
Yeah, Dorsu is an ethical manufacturing brand. So we produce garments in Kampot at our workshop that is made predominantly using surplus fabrics, dead stock, predominantly cotton jersey, t-shirt material, and we produce a line of about 30 to 50 SKUs every year. We have a team of 25 people, and we run a retail store in Phnom Penh as well. But I would say we're considered an ethical fashion label, a sustainable fashion label, because we're trying to do things a little bit differently in the fashion space and to offer customers, an alternative choice to mass fashion or, purchasing from brands or companies that they might not feel comfortable buying from otherwise, you know.
Mm,
I think in some ways, like sustainable fashion is really just offering a choice,
mm,
another choice that's, you know, might be more local or might be more sustainably sourced or
mm.
might be more ethically produced. Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you have like a sort of a B2B side of the business, and then the more direct to consumer as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So we sell our own label, Dorsu, at our store and online. And we also manufacture t-shirts and hoodies and kind of you know, basic apparel.
Mm,
We work with lots of different kinds of organizations across the world, actually. We work with companies, private sector companies who might have ESG, CSR programs that are, you know, kind of related to sustainability, you know, to make their branded apparel or merchandise. So we've worked with some large tech companies globally, or we'll work with schools, you know, who want to have merchandise that, you know,
mm,
in the, you know, the university and school
right.
swag, you
Yeah.
know, kind of industry is quite huge.
Right.
So, you know, we manufacture ethical swag or sustainable swag for different kinds of companies. We also sell into retailers, so different stores across the world that might carry like a multi-brand collection of different, you know, small labels or ethical labels might have a small collection of our stuff for sale there as
Mm,
well. So that the B2B side is also like a little bit diversified.
right.
The B2C side is a bit diversified across, you know, Cambodian customers and expat customers
Mm,
and, you know, people in Australia or the US or Europe. So I like to think we have a healthy mix
yeah.
fundamentally in terms of the on the revenue side, you know.
Cool. Okay. And what was it like, coming in and acquiring the business? What were some of the challenges you had to overcome to kind of get it to where it is today?
I think the first challenge of buying over a business during a global crisis
Yeah.
is just kind of steadying the ship, you
Yeah.
know, and getting people to feel comfortable and confident
Right.
that, you know, just like being able to look at something like it was mine
Mm,
rather than somebody else's, you know. I think that's a challenge when you acquire something rather than like founding it, you know.
right.
I think there is, you know, there's like, yeah, everybody talks about founders, but I don't consider myself a founder, you
But
know.
yeah, I think at least with like an acquisition, it's sort of like a clean break. Whereas sometimes like you have this situation where like a strategic investor will come in and then they'll try and like there'll be this like tussle
Yeah.
for
But I
power.
think because like I mean, yes, behind the scenes, right?
Yeah.
But like on the front end, like you want the brand to be the same.
Yeah.
Like you don't want customers to be concerned that like something, you know, you want to really
Mm,
keep that. So but I think that that's actually challenging because behind the scenes there's actually a lot to do, you
right.
know. And
And were you able to still work with some of the original co-founders?
so the yeah the one half of them, the Cambodian woman Kuntir, is still with us.
That's great.
She
Yeah.
became our production, you know, lead at that time, and that was really helpful. And I mean, she's such an important member, you know,
Mm,
of the team. And you know, I think being a small team and being in the provinces, it's like we don't necessarily have access to a lot of human resources. So turnover, you know, needs to be something that is, you know, appropriately managed in terms of impact, right, to production and schedules and all of these things. But having that sense of continuity, you know, through her was really great. You know, it was
mm,
really important. You know, ultimately, like if you're changing ownership, it should just be, you know, like stuff on paper on the back end, right? Like, but I think actually in this environment, in this market, it's much more important to yeah, to keep everybody involved and, you know, clued into what's happening and what's
mm.
going on because you don't realize how much people know or don't know. And so it's really important to kind of like maybe over communicate, you
Mm.
know, like, okay, nothing has happened. Like, you know, just to make it clear that like nothing is supposed to change.
Yeah.
Okay. Like this is just somebody being switched. We're switching this, but we're handing the keys over. But
Mm.
your job is still your job. Like the way that we relate to one another and the work that we do is still, you know, needs to be at the same level of quality, right?
Right.
And I think that for any business, it's about kind of maintaining that level of quality and things. So I think, yeah, that quickly became one of our first kind of major challenges was to kind of understand how do we maintain that level, you know, of quality around the work that we do. Um, understanding also that like apparel is an industry that has huge problems on quality because with the the race to kind of achieve cheaper and more efficient costs,
Mm.
like quality tends to be the thing that gets cut out of the equation. So start to quickly see how these things happen on a larger scale. But yeah, I mean, I think we didn't really want it to seem very disruptive, from a acquisition point of view. It was rather just like, how does the story unfold from here? Where
Mm.
does the journey go?
Yeah.
Right? People have been with Dorsu for 10 plus years, or various number of years.
Mm.
Um, and then understanding that like brands evolve, companies evolve, the world evolves, and we're
Yeah.
going to go along with that. So it was all about kind of how do we grow rather than how do we like change
Right.
fundamentally.
Mm. And looking into the future a little bit, what would you say like your some of the milestones that you'll look to achieve over the next few years?
I'd like to take a nap. Always want to take a nap. No, on a serious note, I would love to be able to replicate what we do in Kampot in other provinces in
Mm.
Cambodia. So having small workshops, 10, 20 people, in order to accommodate whatever increased demand and,
Mm.
sales that we can do would be fantastic. I really, I do want to see Dorsu be kind of a dominant player in digital. Just kidding. I know we already dominate. No, I mean, I think in terms of digital, I want
Yeah.
to see, I would love to see Dorsu be like a really innovative technology platform where people can shop easily. I think there's space in the market. I know there's Zando and like those other fashion brands. People can, especially young Cambodians love shopping at those places. Obviously, they're much more affordable. Um, but yeah, I think there's really room for us to potentially go into that space a
Mm.
bit more aggressively. But I think, my whole thing about growth for a sustainable fashion label is that it's something that we need to do because uh, the more products that we're making out of sustainably sourced materials, hopefully the theory is that we're helping to put some brakes on the system, right? If we're able to use more and more of stuff that already exists before we start to then extract more resources from the earth in order to make more clothing, that helps, right?
Right.
So I'm like, I know some CEOs or some kind of founders of sustainable brands, like they really struggle with the question of sales because it's like, do we try to go for a lot of sales? Do we try to limit yourself? I'm like, no, you need to go for as much as possible because the work that you do is important and
Mm.
you need to keep doing that. And like, it's not an equivalent of like your t-shirt is not the same as another brand's t-shirts, right? And you have to believe that as a founder or as a creator, as a designer, as, a producer. You have to believe that what you're doing is special and valuable and bring something to the world. And that at scale
Mm.
will create, more great things. So, I do want to see us, yeah, increase our sales around e-commerce.
Yeah.
But I think, huge opportunities there.
Mm.
I would love to expand beyond just like garment production into
Mm.
like what kind of skills and training educational kind of resources could we offer to the community in Kampot. Teaching people how to sew, operate a machine, make patterns.
Mm.
I think Dorsu, because of its unique kind of position, being able to work with the community and different partners and seeing how do we develop like a really strong base for like ecotourism in Kampot, for example, right? Working with other hotels and, hospitality
Yeah.
industry, working with local people also working in sustainability. It's not really clear milestones, but
No, it's pretty. Yeah, it's
you
quite
know,
quite clear on what you want
it's
to, what the focus is moving
yeah,
forward.
it's
Yeah.
not. I mean, yeah, I would love to have more stores, right? I would love to open up in Siem Reap. I think there's a huge opportunity in Siem Reap. Battambang, Tokyo, Saigon.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean, I think, we've gotten to a lot of conversations with different people
Mm.
and bits and bobs here and there, but I think, I'm looking forward to in the future also bringing on potential partners, who will be on board with us for the journey, to kind of, create something that is both disruptive,
Mm.
but, also helpful, and not just for disruption's sake.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, I do want to see the needle move on, you know, value of goods coming out of Cambodia.
Right.
And the increase overall, right? We know we need jobs. We need, whether it's in garment space or tourism or, the burgeoning retail space. Like,
Mm.
I think, yeah, it's, yeah, so big goals.
Yeah, it does also sound like quite a lot is on your shoulders. So, well, one thing we see a lot in Cambodia is like there is a lot of businesses that are like run by maybe one or two co-founders, but
Mm.
sometimes like bringing in that third or fourth people to kind of lighten the load, whether they're like active investors or new co-founders that come
Yeah.
in and you give them some equity in the business to
Yeah.
motivate them. Um, that can be a good strategy to like to move things forward because
Yeah.
it's hard, as you said, it's hard to keep people around,
Yeah.
especially in the startup space because it's
Well,
not that lucrative. It's not
yeah.
that. I mean, obviously there's a story, there's a culture, but for a lot of people, it's only really I find at least it's only really the co-founders that have this sense of like equity and that they're building something that's gonna be worth something
Mm-hmm.
one day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think as like like one of the drivers of the business, it's like, yes, your perception of the value of the business is like, you know, really unconstrained.
Yes. Yeah.
But, we do live in a real world and you have to kind of bring it back to the reality. And I think that you're right. It's like the people, it's really depend on the people that you bring in, the partners that you have,
Mm.
what the capabilities are also like potential to unlock. Because by myself, yeah, we have an angel investor.
Yeah.
Really lucky to, be part of Choice's
Yeah.
accelerator program.
Go Jennifer.
Go, Jen. We love you, Jen. I feel really lucky to have had that, and I know that they are committed to us for the long
Mm.
term, and
Right.
I know that they want it to be a long term relationship and giving us support, not just capital, but
Right.
opportunities to learn and connections and, opening up doors and, helping give guidance and mentorship. It's just really been invaluable, kind of the support that they've given to us. So I feel lucky in that way. And I'm really looking forward, we'll consider together, like where would we want the next, or the future potential, um, you know, partners to kind of help bring us, what level would we want to bring us to, so it's, yeah, I think that it's really been fascinating to kind of see how this whole kind of like network and community can be utilized
Mm.
to support impact kind of organizations like ours,
Yeah.
we're like a social business, kind of stuff where, yes, like our profits are not the most important thing. Profits are absolutely vital to the health of a business, but we reinvest everything back into our team. It's just a different kind of flavor than thinking about how do we 10x,
Right.
how do we go from, here to the moon. We're trying to do that in our own way.
Mm.
Just not necessarily, I'm not trying to get rich quick off of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I think, there's such a amazing community out there of, people who are curious and interested, motivated to really help, kind of seed level, entrepreneurs like myself, where
Mm.
we're still kind of like figuring it out. The world is changing very rapidly. the conversation is changing. It's moving very fast, and we're all trying to keep up with it, and do the best that we can. So, just staying open to having conversations with people and understanding has been really amazing. And, like investors and people in Southeast Asia are just, yeah, they're really incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Open. I
yeah.
mean, very open. Once you have that initial contact and you're creating a more of like a win-win situation, not asking too much and just like trying to give as much as you can. I think that things
I
will
think,
happen.
yeah, for me, it's been really fascinating. Like, normally in business, as a manufacturer, we think in terms of like buyer and supplier a
Mm,
lot. Like, that's our relationship. Like, you have all the power because you're the buyer, you have all the money, you get to call the terms. It's like I'm at your beck and call, right? There's
mm,
kind of an imbalance of power there, kind of. There's
right.
absolutely an imbalance of power there. I control the means of production, right? I create the value that you're going to want to, commoditize or, bring to the market. But, I think a bit of that relationship of like equity has been lost over
Mm,
the hundreds of years of mass manufacturing and
right.
globalization. It's like suppliers and buyers don't see each other on the same level,
Right.
fundamentally. Then when I'm kind of in this like VC PE space and kind of seeing what other kinds of partnerships could there be that are not just buyer supplier. There's not just how do I get the most from you at the smallest,
Right.
for the smallest cost. It's rather like how do I help you grow? How do like being invested in somebody or in something, what does that really mean?
Mm,
So I think, yeah, it's been a really great opportunity to kind of get out. Like, business is not just, make as many things as you can, sell them for as cheap as you can, produce. It's actually like, how do you, come up with like plans and strategies to maximize the value creation,
mm,
and then hopefully, right, like increasing the pie, right, like the size of the pie, rather than just like fighting for market share,
mm,
and your slice of it. I feel like that to me, that's like how I kind of separate the two kind of things. It's
mm.
like this side, I'm trying to think about unit economics,
Yeah.
right? Like, how many things do I need to make this month in order to pay my bills?
Mm,
But on the other side, it's kind of like, well, if you can get a ticket for 50K, 100K, 200K, like, imagine what you could do with that,
mm.
to expand the impact that you have. So that's why I always want to think about not just what next season's collection is going to be, but like
Right.
what like education partners do we want to work with next quarter? Like, what schools do we want to reach out to? What programs do we see, in the arts space, in culture, in the community, that we can support? If you follow Dorsu on social media, we're always kind of talking about other programs and projects that are going on, because that's the best value that we can contribute
Right.
for, with the tools that we have. And it would be a waste for us to use our social media just to blast photos of models
Yeah.
in t-shirts.
Right.
No, I mean, they're beautiful, and obviously we love making imagery and kind of sharing that with the world. But we have a platform,
Right.
and there are things that really mean, there are things that really matter to us, and so we want to be able to utilize that.
Mm.
So yeah, thinking beyond just being a brand, but like, well, how do you like best support and help your community?
And one curious thing, I think we've kind of touched on this a bit, but if you could go back to 2021,
Okay.
to the day you acquired,
Mm-hmm.
or like, the first week that you acquired, and you could tell yourself one thing, what comes to mind? What would you tell yourself?
Wow.
Would you give
Just
yourself,
one?
oh, just one. I mean, just one. Yeah.
Just one. Oh God. Take up meditating
Okay.
as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
No, I think brace yourself, pace yourself,
Mm.
There's been, I mean, ups and downs, huge,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Learning curves have been astronomical. Blood, sweat, and tears, right?
Right.
As everybody's story. Blood, sweat, and tears.
Mm.
I think like being gentle on yourself,
Mm.
taking care of yourself so that you can take care of others, just more around self-care,
Yeah.
actually, you're not responsible for everything.
And how would that like relate to some advice that you'd give aspiring entrepreneurs? Like, I'm sure like a lot of people that listen to the podcast maybe have like a slightly romanticized version of entrepreneurship, right?
Mm.
But when
Or
you
of running
actually,
a fashion brand.
yeah, right. But when you actually like look under the bonnet, like you actually like open it up and have a look inside, it's it's not as glamorous as people
Yeah.
might think,
I mean,
right?
be prepared to work,
Yeah,
right? Nothing prospers unless you work hard.
right.
And I think that at the end of the day, even with our hyper efficient and digitized economies, it still requires like human labor and
Right.
ingenuity and innovation in order to create solutions and make valuable, high quality things. And I think at the end of the day, if the world has more high value quality things, it will be a better world.
Mm.
If we keep making cheap crap that nobody wants and needs and it's just destroying the earth, like, no, that's not what we need.
Mm.
So, I think for founders who are working on solutions, because I don't know a founder who's not like trying to change the world in some way
Mm.
fundamentally, uh, that's not going to happen overnight. And even if it does, there's going to be another problem that pops up later and you're going to feel compelled to, I mean, if you're, I don't know, inspired or people that tend to be in like social impact kind of space, um, you're always going to have another fight
Mm.
to brace yourself for. So yeah, I think hard work is probably the most important thing that I would tell people
Mm.
to kind of not not like disabuse yourself of the notion of the romanticized vision, of becoming the next unicorn or,
Yeah.
the next whomever. But you look at some of the great companies in the world, right? It's been a lot of hard work I mean, incredible amounts of work. And
Yeah.
if you want to ultimately be like one of those giants, you have to put in the work, right?
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I think I was talking to someone about this the other day, well, maybe on one of the other podcasts, and they were saying, you find these people that have this like persistence or this like urgency, this obsession, and that can be great, but it's also then just like that being consistent and
right,
people just like
right,
it just every
right.
single week just showing
Yeah,
up, right?
yeah.
And
I mean, I
that,
think that's, yeah, it's really something that I've learned in this experience has
right.
been like, you need to show up, right? And
Mm.
like 80% of winning is just showing up
Mm.
sometimes,
Right.
and you just show up and you have to put in the work. But that also means like not every situation is an urgent situation. Not everything is an emergency. You
Right.
need to learn to prioritize and, take care of yourself, your mental well-being, your sense of your values and what matters to you, because you're going to be challenged every day about them. And it's when the going gets tough that your values and your grounding becomes really important. And the going always gets tough when
Mm.
you're in entrepreneurial life, like when you're trying to, yeah, when you're trying to change the world. It's not an easy journey at all, but I
Right.
think that ultimately, the rewards and, the experiences that you get from it are so much more meaningful and valuable, because you went through that.
One last final question for us is our traditional closing question for all our podcasts. You may have already touched on this, but what would you
Mm.
say, maybe more broadly, is the greatest piece of advice you've ever been given?
I was lucky. I had a really great commencement speaker for my college graduation. It was Susan Sontag, who's a prolific writer and philosopher. She told us to pay attention and don't take shit from the bastard. I think that her telling us to pay attention and kind of, it's actually been something that's really stuck with me in terms of my life and what, you know because your attention is where you put your energy, and paying attention to the right thing, paying attention to the world around you, paying attention to what people are doing, what people, are talking about, what's, just not just mindlessly going through things. I
Right.
think. I think that's where it's, for me, the connection from like paying attention to things, not being mindless, then being mindful, kind of led to, a kind of a natural interest in, sustainability and fashion. And so it was like kind of following, the path that, um,
Yeah, basically
is unique for you.
get off the autopilot.
Yeah, get off the autopilot. And you know what's I'm inspired by many quotes.
Yeah.
There's that I don't know if it's Robert Frost where it's like if you're on a well-tread path, then you're probably on the wrong path. It's like if you're going down a road that that you've been down before, then it's probably the wrong path or something. That's another one that's kind of stuck with me as well. But it's hard to say one piece of advice, but pay attention. It's all about paying attention.
On that note, we really want to thank you for taking the time to come on Rising Giants today. Learned a lot about the fashion space, sustainability, and looking forward to seeing all the news of Dorsu in the future.
Thanks, Max. I appreciate it.